Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, November the 21st, 2023. Today I want to talk about Argentina. I don't really know much about Argentina. I've never been there. I don't speak Spanish, but I do know that there has been a presidential election, and there is a winner, and the winner is a man called Javier Milei. I probably completely butchered his name, but I'm not really a linguist, so. Javier Milei is the president-elect of Argentina, and he is going to be inaugurated, I believe, on December the 10th. And he is a right-winger, a libertarian, he's planning to put Argentina on the road to recovery. Now, when you talk about Argentina, you must remember that this country is a disaster, and it has been a disaster for a very long time. I mean, if you think about it, in the First World War, Argentina was not at war, but Argentina was exporting. I don't think it was exporting a lot of meat around the world, and it did really well. I think at the end of the First World War, it was something like the seventh richest country on earth. It was almost on the breakthrough. It was about to make a breakthrough to be like, first world country, to have the kind of prosperity that we might have seen in sort of North America or Western Europe. Then it just blew it. One reason I think that Argentina blew it was a man called Juan Perón. Now, Perón was this general. He was sort of very popular at a time, and his legacy lives on in Argentina. Peronism is still a major political force, and if I remember rightly, ages ago, I did a course in Latin American economic history, but if I remember rightly, what happened was he wanted to nationalize everything, or a lot of stuff in Argentina. I think that maybe the railways and stuff. There was huge government expenditure on bringing things under state control, and it killed the economy, and we've had this pattern ever since. The state trying to be in control, trying to control the economy, and just always failing. And as a result, we've had mega inflation, and the peso constantly having to be devalued, revalued, whatever, and so it's been a disaster for Argentinians who were trying to save. But the Peronists have tried. They are everywhere in Argentina, and I suppose they have strong connections with labor and the organs of the state. So it's tough beating the Peronists because they haven't gone away. Now, as far as Javier Milei is concerned, now he is an advocate of something called the Austrian school. Now, the Austrian school of economics, they take the view, I believe, that just government shouldn't interfere, that you need to have small government. I think he actually wants to get rid of the central bank in Argentina. That's a common theme, but people who support the Austrian school. There are a lot of people who actually support the Austrian school. They want to get rid of the Federal Reserve, and so just let the market decide, and accept the fact that every now and then you're going to have boom and bust. You're going to have the business cycle is going to run its course, and the government should not intervene. And people should be able to go to the wall, go bankrupt. It should be fine, and that's the way to run an economy. Now he's got there are other things going on in his life. Now he is an economist. He is quite a colourful character. He uses a lot of bad language when dealing with his opponents. He also is apparently a tantric sex coach. So there's another side to his life. He's made remarks about I don't know why threesomes are okay and this kind of thing. But yet, on the other hand, he's very anti-abortion, and he wants to have a vote to ban abortion in Argentina. Because at the moment, because I think Argentina, for a long time there were restrictions on abortion, very strong restrictions on abortion. Then they eased up. Anyway, he wants to go back. So he's not. He says he's a libertarian in some ways. He wants people to be able to sell organs and that kind of thing. He believes that legalization of drugs, the kind of libertarian stuff. But not when it comes to abortion. So that is Javier Milei, and I want to look at his horoscope. I also want to look at the horoscope of Argentina. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, November the 21st, 2023. Okay, so let's look at the astrology for today. It's not really a particularly exciting day. The moon is still in Pisces. You can see the moon is making a square to Mercury. That's today, but this is, remember, November the 21st, 2023. This chart you're seeing is set for noon New York time. So moon square Mercury. This says something about how we're able to communicate, or how we try to communicate. Mercury is in Sagittarius. Mercury doesn't work very well in Sagittarius. So with the moon square Mercury, there's a lot we've got to say, or rather a lot we want to say, but we might say something and then immediately regret it. Because, the moon and Mercury, they're the two communication planets. The moon is about emotional communication. Mercury is about more sort of mental, cerebral communication. The words will come flowing out, but a lot of it could be garbage, or we might get our facts wrong. So I think we do have to be careful when we start talking, because there could be problems. So if in doubt, just keep your mouth shut. So what else is going on? Venus is making a biquintile to Uranus. That means there's Venus, there's Uranus. So Venus and Uranus, they are 144 degrees apart. That's 2/5 of the circle, assuming you've got slices that are equal. So Venus is the planet of beauty. Biquintiles are connected with style. Uranus is about the kind of, is about trying to be revolutionary. So some people may feel the temptation to sort of dress in quite a revolutionary way, or it's not going to be necessarily them, the real them, but it's just a style that some people are going to want to present. Relationships, there could be, in terms of relationships, people are going to want to give the impression of being quite open to different kinds of relationships, to unusual kinds of relationships. But it's all words, it's all style. Do people really believe what they're saying when they talk about relationships? And when they talk about how people should come together? Venus, also planet of money. So, when people talk about money, and they might have brilliant ideas about money, exciting, revolutionary ideas about money, but that's the kind of style that they want to create. It's not necessarily real, so it's important not to be fooled. Now, I should point out that the Sun is now in the last degree of Scorpio. The Sun is about to go into Sagittarius. So with the Sun in the last degree of Scorpio, it's maybe a time for some of us to finish things off. Particularly if we're Scorpios, but maybe for other signs, maybe the water signs, Pisces, Cancer. Something is not quite completed, and for all of us it may be some kind of emotional task that's not quite completed, maybe about dealing with things that have happened in the past, maybe apologizing, in terms of relationships, making things that are all making sure that everything is sorted out, that kind of thing. So we've got today to sort that one out. So if there's any loose ends hanging over us, particularly loose ends that have been building up since the Sun went into Scorpio at the end of October, now would be the time to tie them up. I want to finish on a more negative note, and it relates to the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So here is Mars, here is Saturn. You can see that the midpoint is sort of in the middle of Capricorn. And so the Sun and Mars are making a square. Sorry, let's start again. The Sun is now aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint by a 45-degree aspect, and Venus is making a square to the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So Mars-Saturn midpoint is about decay, delay, frustration, and it can also be about death. So we've got the Sun and Venus both aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint today. And I think that, that could be difficult. I think a lot of us may feel really frustrated. Venus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, that can make for difficulties in relationships. That's true. So watch out for that. And, when you've got all that stuff on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, don't do anything dangerous. And, if, there are going to be certain places in the world which are going to feel that more than other places. It is about death, perhaps news about death, an atmosphere of death. I don't know what, it's not that it's really going to affect us. Depends where you are. It's just something about the general atmosphere in the world. If we want to sort of, come to terms with it and see this in a positive sense, maybe, having a walk in a cemetery graveyard, might be a fun thing. No, I don't say a fun thing to do, but might be a sort of a calming thing to do. It would be a way of accepting the symbolism of the Sun and Venus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. But yes, there may be a feeling of fatality just everywhere. Now, as I said, I must emphasize it's not really personal, but it does perhaps cast a small shadow on a day, having the Sun and Venus aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Okay, so what I want to do now is do my forecasts for the 12 signs for today. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, November the 21st, 2023. Aries, your imagination is going all over the place, which is fine, provided you don't put fantasy into action. It's a time for staying still, for being theoretical rather than practical. And if you have a good idea, consider the possibility, but it's based on a false premise. The less said, the better. Taurus, in your social life, things are easier, and now might be a great time to interact with friends and associates. And when meeting new people, don't overthink the matter. You naturally want to work out their underlying motives, but maybe you should just, accept them as they are. You don't have to trust, and you don't have to distrust. You can just keep an open mind. Gemini, you somehow need to put yourself in other people's shoes. Not because empathy in itself is a good thing, but because if you want to be taken seriously, you have to demonstrate that you can take into account alternative viewpoints. By adopting a high profile, but also being flexible, you have the best chance of meeting new and exciting people. Cancer, let things float across your mind. There's no need to comment, no need to make any decisions. Indeed, with the moon making a stressful aspect to Mercury, there's probably nothing that has to be said, at least nothing useful. You think you know the answers, but it's probably too early to make decisions. Leo, you feel yourself to be in a process of change. Leaving one place, moving on to somewhere else, and during this process of transition, there's probably not much that can be done. You have to wait it out until you're on the other side of the river, on firm ground. The final step may be the most difficult step. Virgo, what you think and feel may be at odds with each other, and you may not be sure what the right action is. And maybe no action is required, at least for the time being. Do what feels comfortable and don't allow yourself to be pressurized, because the more familiar the setting, the stronger and healthier you'll be. Libra, you have your limits, and today you need to know when to stop. Not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Because if you allow things to just run their course, there's a danger that you exhaust yourself. No, you have to be very clear about your boundaries, and you mustn't feel guilty about being selfish. Scorpio, it's the last day of the Scorpio season. So it may be a time to tie up loose ends. And if there's something you haven't done, which you know is important, then you should try to get it out of the way. Elsewhere, there may be some financial irritation. Perhaps you or someone else is spending too much money on pleasure and leisure. Sagittarius, you can feel that things are moving your way, but a bit of patience is required. There are a few remaining obstacles in the very short term. You're not able to take dramatic initiatives. You need to create the right space for yourself, a place where you understand the rules, and ideally where it's you making the rules. Capricorn, like yesterday, your words will have an impact, but will the words come out right? With the moon making a stressful aspect to Mercury, it's possible that your message gets confused, or you say the wrong things at the wrong time. So don't say things unless you're very sure of your facts. Aquarius, if there's something you want to do, then you should probably do it, provided you've done your calculations. But what you don't want to do is overanalyze the problem, or worse still, listen too hard to other people. You could be pushed this way and that and end up achieving nothing. Half measures are just not worth the effort. Pisces. The moon continues moving through your star sign, where it makes a square aspect to Mercury. You'll be a hard person to miss, and you'll have little difficulty expressing yourself. And in terms of work, you'll be an inspiration. But it's okay to be yourself without having to resort to publicity and boasting. Okay, so I'm now going to move away from astrology for a bit and look at the I Ching. So, as always, I ask the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching this video? And I threw 3 coins in the air 6 times, and the first hexagram I got was hexagram 46, pushing upwards. It's not a bad hexagram. It's about making progress. Not necessarily spectacular progress, but it's certainly solid progress. So, we can move forward. And if we're in a situation, for example, at work, where you've got lots of people trying to make progress, and it's going to be quite easy to get recognition. It's all about doing what you can, because this second line moves, and it's saying basically, a small contribution, if that's the best you can do, is enough. So we do what we can for the common good, and we are appreciated. So overall, not spectacular hexagram, but it certainly makes for a stable day. Things we can move forward, we can get recognition. And this hexagram 46, it transitions to hexagram 15, which we had yesterday as well. So 15, modesty. So the fact that we got modesty yesterday and today, kind of suggests that this is a larger theme. Modesty is not about boasting. It's not about, telling the world how wonderful we are, because really we don't have to do it. It's unnecessary. People recognize us for who we are. We don't have to shout and scream about it. And really, that's all I've got to say about the matter. So overall, I Ching looks pretty good. Okay, so now let's move back to the astrology and let's talk about what's going on in Argentina. This man, Javier Milei, has just been elected president. Now, I have no bias one way or another. I don't have preferences in Argentine politics. I suppose, given the absolute disaster that Argentina has been really for the last century, and how difficult it is to make sense of what's going on, for a politician, for a president. I suppose you have to wish whoever has been elected president the best, because they're going to need all the good luck in the world to be able to make any progress. So here, and with Javier Milei, he's up against the whole Peronist establishment. One wonders if he's got a chance. So this is his chart. Now, I mentioned the fact that he was claiming he was a tantric sex coach, and that some of his pronouncements about sex and sexual preferences, he's made, he has made these pronouncements. So I was thinking, well, you'd expect something to do with Venus-Mars here, and sure enough, he's got things connected with Venus-Mars. So his Mars is in Libra, his Venus is in Scorpio. Now Mars is in its detriment in Libra, because Mars rules Aries. Venus is in its detriment in Scorpio, because Venus rules the opposite sign to Scorpio, Taurus. But Mars is in Venus's sign, which is Libra. Venus is in Mars's sign, which is Scorpio. This means that Venus and Mars are in mutual reception. So although they're poorly placed by sign, because of that mutual reception, the situation is completely reversed. So that Venus and Mars, they become pretty strong, not least because the Sun is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. You see, there's the Sun at 29 Libra, there's Mars 1 Libra, and then you move 26 degrees on, and now you've got Venus. So Sun is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. That certainly suggests the importance of sexuality and charisma. If you want, Meghan, she has Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So here is a man who is charismatic. I don't know, maybe he has sex appeal, I don't know. You can see from his picture that there's a very stylized presentation there. Now, I should say one thing about his time of birth. If you, on the Astro.com pages, it gives his time of birth at 11:59 p.m. on October the 22nd. If you go to Astro Theme, it gives his time of birth at 2 a.m. And at first I saw this and I thought, what is going on? I was really upset about that, because I was sure I had his birth time, and then I had this contradiction. Astro Theme was giving one birth time, and Astro.com was giving another birth time. And I was really confused, really upset. I was thinking of not covering him at all because I didn't know his birth time. But then I looked closely. I clicked open the bit of the birth chart that Astro Theme was showing, and it seemed to say 2H. And I thought, okay, 2H, the second hour. But that H was not an H, it was a 4, 24H. So it's 24 hora, which I think is the Spanish for hours. So if you do notice that, if you do see Astro Theme giving a 2 a.m. birth time, that's almost certainly a misreading of the birth certificate. He was born at the end of October the 22nd. Now, you will see that his ascendant at that time, at 11:59, is 0 degrees 6 minutes Cancer. Now, I've set that for Palermo, Argentina, where he was born, not Palermo, Sicily. If you set it for somewhere else, in generally Buenos Aires, it comes to 29-something Gemini. I looked at TikTok and saw some Spanish-speaking astrologers talking about his chart, and they all seemed, a couple of them had late Gemini rising. So we have no idea of knowing whether he's got Cancer or Gemini rising. We don't know. So although I've got 0 degrees 6 Cancer rising, I suspect he might have Gemini rising. I don't know, but I'm sort of going to treat it as a Gemini rising chart. So I thought I'd get that out of the way. So yeah, so he's got Sun on the Venus Mars midpoint. So yeah, a man who is very charismatic. So charismatic that he's been elected president, and by quite a wide margin as well. Um, and he is a disruptor. I think there's no doubt from this chart that he is a disruptor. Um, he has got Uranus on the IC. There's his IC, assuming this time of 11:59 p.m. is right. He's got Uranus on the IC, so that is about the foundations of something being disrupted. And he's also got Saturn. There's Saturn is sesquiquadrate his Mars-Uranus midpoint. There's a lot of tension there. Maybe he just wants to be violent. Maybe he regards the situation in Argentina as being so bad that he wants to be violent. No, I mean I should not give the impression that I'm necessarily a fan of this man. I mean he is being accused of being associated with people who supported who were supporters of the government of the old government before the Falklands War. The generals in the late 70s, and we shouldn't forget that the regime in the late 70s in Argentina was absolutely disgusting in terms of its human rights abuses. And if there's any suggestion that he has looked sympathetically towards what was going on in Argentina in the late 70s and very early 80s, I think that would be completely unacceptable. A lot of loads of people just disappeared. I think they were thrown out of helicopters. It was bad. So I think there's perhaps in some quarters going to be a fear about that. He says he's a libertarian and supports business, but what's going to happen when he's actually in government? I mean, we don't know. But anyway, he's got that anger there, I think, about the way things are working, and we don't know how that anger is going to manifest. Another thing about Javier Milei is he's got a Venus-Saturn opposition. Now, you could look at that Venus-Saturn opposition in terms of relationships. You could say, well, in spite of all his pronouncements about being a tantric sex coach and threesomes and all of this, he's got Venus-Saturn opposition. Venus-Saturn is about perhaps not being able to relate. I mean, he says he can relate, but he's an expert on relating, perhaps, at least in a sexual sense. But with that Venus-Saturn opposition, maybe not. It's also about control. Of course, Tantra is about control. Venus, and so you've got, he's got this Venus-Saturn opposition. But you could also say that this says something about his views on economics. When he becomes president, when he becomes Argentinian head of state on December the 10th, in a way, this will be the chart of Argentina. If you take the view that he is the king and the king is the land and the land is the king, Venus opposition Saturn. Venus is money. Venus is the country's money. And Saturn opposition Venus wants to control the country's money. I suppose, I don't know, he's not a monetarist, but they'd say, the control of the money supply or something like that. But yeah, he wants to indeed close down the Argentine central bank. Will he do it? I wouldn't have thought so. Doing that kind of stuff is really difficult. He may be president, but he's not a dictator. And there are going to be so many constraints upon him. So those are a few things about his natal chart. Then we have the question of, how did he get to be president, and what are his prospects like? So he had his solar return. This is his solar return for October the 22nd, 2023. Now, interestingly, the Argentine electoral system, I think I got this right, you had a primary and then you had a runoff. So the runoff was, I think, the 19th of November, but the primary was on October the 22nd. So he had the primary on his birthday. And so if we do the solar return for his birthday, which is the same day as the primary, and of course he got through to the final round, the runoffs, this solar return for October the 22nd, 2023, which would be when he turned, he's born in 1970, so when he turned 53, in many respects is an absolutely brilliant chart. I mean, look at this. He's got Jupiter rising. This is set for Palermo, Argentina. Got Jupiter rising. Jupiter, planet of good fortune, on the ascendant. Okay, I understand that it's retrograde, but I still think that's pretty good. And Moon in Aquarius on the midheaven. So I know that it's a square. Moon is making a square to Jupiter, and you could say, well, is that fortunate? I think it is pretty fortunate if the Moon is exactly on the midheaven and if Jupiter is exactly on the ascendant. So I think that is a very powerful signature of success in that solar return. I do think there's a warning, though, in this solar return. And the warning is this, that Mars in Scorpio. The seventh house represents one's enemies. If you think about it, well, actually, let me see if I can find a chart. If you look at, let me just give you an example of what can happen. Let me hope. If you look at the chart of let me see if I can find it. Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy and his solar return. The solar return he had. Here's Bobby Kennedy. Born November the 20th, 1925. Oh, he had his birthday yesterday. I should have wished him happy birthday. Well, he's been dead for some time. So that's just interesting. Bobby Kennedy, born on November the 20th. Joe Biden, born on November the 20th. Anyway, that's Bobby Kennedy's chart. And as we know, in 1968, Bobby Kennedy was murdered. By Sirhan, although some people think it wasn't really by Sirhan. But anyway, Bobby Kennedy's got Mars on the 7th house cusp. Now let's have a look at Bobby Kennedy's solar return. And look, it's in Scorpio. Now let's have a look at Bobby Kennedy's solar return for 1967. This was the birthday before he was assassinated. So we'll do a solar return for 1967. There we go. There you go. You can see he had Mars on the 7th house cusp. So this was Bobby Kennedy's 7th house, the birthday before he was assassinated. Mars, powerful Mars on the 7th house cusp. That's the assassin. That's him. This was the there's a powerful signature there of him being assassinated. Now, in Bobby Kennedy's chart, he had Mars on the 7th house cusp in his natal chart, and he also had Mars on the 7th house cusp in his return before he was assassinated. In both cases, a strong Mars. Natal chart, Mars in Scorpio. Solar return, Mars in Capricorn in its exaltation. So going back to the solar return of Javier Milei and him having his Mars on the in Scorpio. Okay, he does not have Mars in the 7th in his birth chart, so it could, it's not as bad as it could be. But I think that Mars in Scorpio represents powerful enemies. He's not going to get a free ride. He's got, if he tries to do anything, if he tries to put any of his program into action, there are going to be people who are going to be out to get him, and I think that really does show in his solar return. Okay, so that's his solar return. Going back to his natal chart. I did say that I would look at his natal chart. I wanted to compare his chart with that of Argentina. So this is a chart I have for Argentina. It says it's noon. It probably isn't noon. This is when Argentina declared its independence. July the 9th, 1816. It says noon. Was it a noon? I don't know. In Tucumán, Argentina. So the question is, how does Javier Milei relate to the chart of Argentina? So let's do a wheel. This is, so on the inner wheel we've got the chart of Argentina. On the outer wheel we've got the chart of Javier Milei. There is Argentina's Mars, Mars in Leo, and you can see that Javier Milei's Saturn is square Argentina's Mars. There may be issues there. I think there are going to be powerful forces in Argentina that are going to be annoyed with him, and maybe even the military. Maybe Mars represents the military. Maybe there are people in the military are perhaps not too happy about it. Maybe that if he's really serious about cutting the budget, I mean that's something he needs to be aware of. But it's general friction, frustration. So there's an issue there, and you can see that. Actually, Argentina has an opposition, a wide opposition between Mars and Saturn in its chart, in the 1816 chart, and Milei's Saturn is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, so 20 Taurus. So that might represent some difficulties there. I think that the people of Argentina at the moment obviously think he's wonderful because they just voted for him, but the country itself and the apparatus of state, it's going to be different. And you can see that there's his Venus in Scorpio. It's square Saturn, square his country's Saturn. So overall, I don't think that he and his country quite gel. The country as a whole. So I think it's going to be quite difficult. Could be quite difficult for him. And I want to finish by looking at Javier Milei's Vedic chart. So I've got his Vedic chart. Okay, so here's his Vedic chart. In terms of his Vedic chart, he's got moon in Cancer. That's kind of quite nice, having a moon in Cancer in its own sign. Remember, in his Western chart, he's got his moon in Leo, but when you look at the Vedic chart, it goes back into the previous sign, because you take off around 23, 24 degrees. in 2020, a couple of years ago, just a couple of years ago, he started his moon dasha. It lasts 10 years. It lasts for 10 years, the moon dasha. And so this is his kind of run up to being elected president. So moon in Cancer, possibly quite fortunate. I mean, it's not. I mean, by Shadbala, there's the strength. It's not. I mean, it's not massively strong, but it's good enough. And so you can see that on June the 10th, 2023, he started his moon Mahadasha, main period, and the Jupiter sub-period. So his Jupiter is in his fifth house. Fifth house is a very fortunate place for Jupiter to be. For Jupiter to be, the fifth house is, it's pretty lucky there. So Moon Jupiter, that fits perfectly the concept of being successful, of becoming president. But this subdasha doesn't last forever. Indeed, it comes to an end in October of next year, and that's when he enters the Saturn dasha, and his Saturn subdasha, and his Saturn is actually quite weak. His Saturn is in Aries. Saturn is fallen in Aries because it's exalted in Libra, fallen in Aries. So that might be a time where he starts to run into real problems, and Saturn rules the 8th house, which again is not great. So I think his Indian chart suggests why things might be going well for him at the moment, but I think there's a warning that come next October he has to start being careful. He has to be careful, and there are other things going on. Let me just go back to his Western chart before I finish. So going, just going back to his regular chart. He's got, this Saturn. You see, his Saturn is opposition his Venus, and Uranus has just been conjunct his Saturn. In fact, there was a full moon, new moon at 2044 Scorpio, which was opposition his Saturn, which kind of got him in that was the new moon just before he was elected president. Uranus is going to be creating continuous problems for Saturn. It's going to be conjunct his Saturn again, and then next year it's going to be opposition his Venus. So that's something he's going to have issues with next year. So Uranus on his Saturn-Venus midpoint, and then he's got his Sun. His Sun is at 2917 Libra, so he's going to have Pluto very soon is going to be square his Sun. So, that might suggest some kind of power struggle. So, struggle with, I don't know, the bureaucracy or the powers that be, whatever. So yes, I can see why he's been elected president, but I think looking at his Vedic chart, looking at the Pluto transit, the Uranus transit, I think as he gets into his presidency, it's going to become increasingly difficult. But I haven't looked at this in great detail. Let's just finish up by looking at his solar return for next year. So this would be for. See, there's his solar return for next year, for October 2024, assuming he gets that far. You can see Pluto's close to the 7th house cusp. There's his Sun, moving to the square of Pluto. So there is cause for concern there, I think. So I'm thinking, yeah, it's not going to be easy for him. I know everyone in Argentina is excited about it, although, of course, progressives are not so happy about his election as president. I mean, he's been compared to Trump, the Argentine Trump, and so forth. He is a populist. He's on the right. Yeah, some people are not happy about it at all. But one obviously wants him to be successful because Argentina does deserve a break. But I hope he's not a totalitarian, and I hope he has nothing to do with the kind of government that Argentina had in the late 1970s. But yeah, I mean, I will look at his chart again, I hope, so that, to look at it in more detail. Anyway, that's Argentina. Sorry, I don't know more about Argentina, but I think I did my best. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.